Hi everyone. Hope you're doing well and we're able to benefit from the last video that I uploaded. Today I'm going to talk about chapters 2 and chapters 3 in To Kill a Mockingbird. And I'm also going to loosely go over some of the study guide questions. So if you're struggling with those, hopefully this video will clue you into a couple of the answers and some insight. And so what I did is I did go ahead and I printed the notes that are uploaded onto Google Classroom, and then as I was reading, I just kind of took time to jot down, I'll get it a little bit closer to the camera, just some notes about things that were occurring in chapters 2 and 3, so that way I can go back later and kind of re-skim those things and say, oh yeah, that's what happened in that chapter without having to go back and do a full reread of the text. But so in chapter 2, this is where Scout finally gets to go to school. She is this incredibly smart little girl, and she can already read and write before she enters school. Now, during this time, students wouldn't typically go to like a kindergarten. They would enter in school and start in first grade, and so that's what Scout's getting ready to do. And as you know, even if a kindergartner was entering kindergarten and they could read and write before they even entered kindergarten, that's pretty you know, that's wonderful to see. They're pretty advanced. And so this is definitely Scout because she's been raised in this environment that values education and reading and writing and whatnot. And so when she gets to school and she doesn't see this same enthusiasm for education, I think she's a little bummed. She's a little put out and put down by this first day of school. It's a major letdown and a disappointment. And in fact, she doesn't want to go back. But I'm getting a little bit ahead here from what I want to start with. So at the beginning of chapter 2, we learn that Dill, he goes back. He's only in Macomb with his aunt just during the summers. So once school starts in September, he has gone back to where he lives, and Scout and Jem are without their friend for the remainder of the school year. So Jem, he walks Scout to school on the first day with a little bit of extra jingle in his pockets, meaning their dad, Atticus, kind of paid him to walk his sister to school and see her off and make sure that she made it there okay. Atticus doesn't do it himself. We're not certain why, probably working or whatnot. But again, like I mentioned before, he's involved but not fully involved. So anyway, they get to school and Scout gets to meet her brand new teacher. And her brand new teacher is a brand new teacher in that fact that she's 21, fresh out of college. She's got some, probably like most teachers, when they first get into the step foot into the classroom in their very own classroom at that, you know, things are going to be a certain way. All students are ready to learn and they can't wait, and no one's going to struggle, no one's going to cause a disruption. And the teacher realizes on the very first day of her first day in her very first classroom, yeah, this isn't really how things are. So Miss Caroline is learning just right along with Scout in a different sense. And so Scout is kind of struggling with that as well. And it gets her in a little bit of hot water with her teacher, the fact that Scout can already read and she can already write. And she tells Scout, well, you've been taught wrong. You need to unlearn or forget whatever you've been taught, and I'm going to teach you the right way. And so that's extremely discouraging to Scout, I could imagine. Couple looking at my other notes here. Uh, Scout, she stands up for a classmate, Walter Cunningham. So Walter Cunningham, he, you know, at the middle of the day, lunch period, you know, that Miss Caroline, she says, okay, everybody, go ahead. You can, you know, you're welcome to go home and have lunch with your families and then return. Or if you brought your lunch, put it on your desk. And as she's going around and inspecting the lunches, we see that one of Scout's classmates, Walter Cunningham, he's a boy from a poor farm in the area who was hit especially hard by the circumstances of the Great Depression. And he has no lunch, and so Miss Cunningham kindly, unwisely, offers him a quarter so he can buy his own lunch and says, just pay me back when you can. It's not a big deal. Your parents can give you a quarter and you can have lunch today. Well, he politely refuses the money and doesn't, pride kind of stands in the way, and he doesn't want to tell her, come out and tell her right away, I won't be able to afford to pay you back. We don't have a quarter for me to give you. I can't take it. So, everybody in the classroom, this is kind of painfully apparent and obvious to the kids in the classroom because they know the families in the community. Miss Miss Cunningham, uh, sorry, Miss Fisher, she is not familiar with all the families and the situations of the different families and the children. She doesn't know that kind of stuff because she's an outsider in this new community. So, she thinks she's doing a nice thing, and she is doing a nice thing. She just doesn't know. And so somebody needs to tell her. And so Scout does. And so this kind of embarrasses Miss Caroline, and she spanks Scout, like slaps her on the hands, with a ruler, makes her stand in the corner, kind of embarrasses Scout, and gets her in a little bit of hot water. And so Scout takes her anger out on Walter once they leave to go to lunch, because kids that lived nearby, if your home was close, you could walk home for lunch and come back, and lunch is dinner. So for their dinner meal, they walk home, but before they walk home, well, Scout, she's gonna take this anger out on Walter because she kind of told the teacher why he couldn't take the money and got in trouble for that. So she's rubbing Walter's face in the dirt, kind of roughhousing with him a little bit, and Jem steps in and says, why don't you come home and have dinner with us, have lunch with us? And so he kind of smooths things over a little bit. He's kind of very diplomatic and kind of this peacemaker. And we see these same qualities in Atticus. He's refined and sometimes has a way with words and people. So Walter comes home, decides he'll come home with them and have lunch, and they go about eating their lunch, and he wants molasses. He requests some molasses, which is kind of unusual in that he starts pouring molasses, this thick syrup, all over his vegetables and his meat. And Scout starts to speak up, saying, what the heck are you doing? And Calpurnia she quickly pulls Scout aside and lets her know, Walter Cunningham, he is our guest, and you will treat him with respect and dignity. And if you can't, then you're going to sit right here in the kitchen, and you're going to stay out here with me, and you won't get to go in there and have conversation with everybody else. And she lets her know that you're not better than anyone else. Just because, as Scout says, he's just a Cunningham, Calpurnia says, well, no, we all have value, and nobody's just a Cunningham. So she kind of teaches Scout some of these lessons just right along with her father, and like the lessons she'll learn later in the book that we haven't touched on yet. Let's see, a couple other things that I jotted down. In chapter 3, we see, poor Miss Caroline. She just had a rough first day of teaching too, just like Scout had a rough first day of being in first grade. Miss Caroline, after the whole dinner debacle and the issue with Walter Cunningham in the quarter, she sees some lice or, some kind of bed bugs in one of her students' hair. And this student is Burris Ewell. And the Ewells will play a huge part and a huge role in this novel. And I just want to take a moment, if you have this copy of the book, I'm in a different copy today. What I'm going to be reading to you is on pages 32 and 33. I lied. Nope. It would be on page 35. And so this is a little description of Burris Ewell. The boy stood up. He was the filthiest human I had ever seen. His neck was dark gray, the backs of his hands were rusty, and his fingernails were black deep into the quick. He peered at Miss Caroline from a fist-sized clean space on his face. No one had noticed him, probably because Miss Caroline and I entertained the class most of the morning. "And Burris," said Miss Caroline, "please bathe yourself before you come back tomorrow." The boy laughed rudely. "You ain't sendin' me home, missus. I was on the verge of leavin'. I done my time for this year." Miss Caroline looked puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" The boy did not answer. He gave a short, contemptuous snort. One of the elderly members of the class answered her. "He's one of the Ewells, ma'am." And I wondered and I wondered if this explanation would be as unsuccessful as my attempt, but Miss Caroline seemed willing to listen. "The whole school's full of 'em. They come first day every year and then leave. The truant lady gets 'em here, 'cause she threatens 'em with the sheriff. But she's given up trying to hold 'em. She reckons she's carried out the law, just getting their names on the roll and running 'em here the first day. You're supposed to mark 'em absent for the rest of the year." So Miss Caroline Fisher is learning a little bit about the families in the area and what the expectations are. So the Ewell family, the expectation is that they'll come on the first day of school and they have things to attend to at home. So in the 1930s, in a small rural farming community, not everybody would finish school, and not everybody would finish school because they had an obligation and expectation to help out at home. So especially when times were tough and they needed every set of hands to help. And so that was the expectation and for this particular family. So Miss Caroline, she's realizing that, and the students are helping her realize those things. Meanwhile, Scout goes home and she finally talks it out a little bit with both Calpurnia and then later Atticus about what a terrible day she has and how she just wants to be taught at home, just like Atticus was by his parents. And Atticus says, "I can't do that. I work. There's no way for me to do that." And so she tells him about the teacher and she tells him about Burris Ewell and how it's not fair that he gets these exceptions made for him, but she doesn't. And so this is where on page 39, Atticus tells her, and this is kind of perhaps the most famous line from this novel. Atticus says, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." And so Atticus, he has this way of teaching his kids these values and these morals about you can't judge someone if you don't know the full extent of what they're going through, and you can't know unless you are that person. So you have to have empathy and be understanding. So, grudgingly by the end of the chapter 3, Atticus and Scout come to an agreement that Scout will continue to go to school and hopefully keep her nose clean and continue on with her education.